Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for showing up. It is my great pleasure to introduce my friend Professor Brian YECIES from the University of Wollongong in Australia, and he will give two talks on transmedia storytelling and AI innovation today and on Friday afternoon at the same time. Brian has been a source of inspiration for me for quite a long time now, and he has been very supportive that guiding me away. For me, as a newcomer into media studies, I've benefited quite a lot from Brian's supervision. And today, in this first talk, he will bring us into this exciting world of digital comics, usually known as Webtoons. And on Friday, he will talk about the copyright protection and blockchain remix. Well, that's a term that I came up for the very first time. So without further ado, let's welcome Brian.
Thank you, Dingkun. And thank you for this opportunity. I'm very honored to be here. I've come to Hong Kong many times in my life, but for some reason, these days it seems more special. I'd also like to thank you for taking a time off from your day trading part-time jobs, from trading stocks. It's a joke. So many people are involved in all these different platforms today. We have such power that we can't even begin to appreciate. And Webtoons is only one small example of that power at our fingertips. And in fact, that's how it's quantified, by how much time we give our devices and our content, how much finger time we give our devices and content. It's quite a new metric. We might call it a kind of a cultural power metric. The charisma and the demand and our addiction to not only the digital devices, but to content by itself. So anyway, it's great to really be here and to share some of this original research with you. The project is a long-term project, and it has so many different facets regarding visible culture, but also invisible culture. So it's very much about the power of soft power and the transportation of culture and the essence of culture. And it's quite fascinating. We're in a time period now where Asian culture, Chinese, Malay, Japanese, Korean, is spreading around the globe, but in an invisible way, more invisible than ever before. It's quite a challenge to try and research this invisible culture. You know, it's not easily seen. It's happening behind the scenes. So today is very much a story that's both obvious, conspicuous. We know that it's from Asia, but on the other hand, there's a global current and a global spread and a global phenomenon occurring that is coming from Asia, but mixing with global cultures, content creators and users. And translators hold the key to that globalization process, that opening up this culture to the world, which I think makes it very relevant to certainly what Dingkun is studying and what some of us are trying to unpack. So thank you for that warm introduction, Dingkun, and again, it's great to be here. So let me change the slide. Let's see, how do we change the slide? There we go.
Yep.
Today, we have three general considerations, three general agenda items. One is to introduce this phenomenon of Webtoons, which are born in South Korea. And when global phenomenon and a global culture is born outside of North America, outside of Hollywood, that's something very unique and something very special. Something probably unthinkable not too long ago. Give you an overview of the fan translation service, which again is the driver for this global phenomenon. And then look at its links, its conspicuous and inconspicuous links to a wave, a cultural wave, and a thing we might refer to as soft power. The larger project is part of an Australian Research Council grant. It's a 3-year grant that the Australian government thought was worthy to study, and also an assessment committee of my peers had to go through 2 stages. It had to make the politicians happy to approve the government funding, but it also had to be sexy enough for scholars to say, yeah, we need this project. So it wasn't a lot of money, but it was legitimacy, and it was a sign of innovation, something innovative. Now, why would the Australian government and why would Australian scholars want someone to study this? What can Australia learn from this phenomenon? That was one of the questions that I had to answer in the grant proposal. And it's a question that we all have to answer and address in our research. What's the national benefit of all of our projects? It's a really important question, and it's something that I would love to hear all of you, if we had time, maybe we will have time, go around the room and you could tell us what's the national benefit, what's the global benefit of your work. In any case, it's about consumption of popular culture, production of popular culture, the flow, and of course, transmedia adaptation. Come on in, we just started. And it's all part of both, again, an invisible and a visible part of the so-called creative economy, an economy, a global economy that we're in the middle of right now, driven by fans, driven by users, content creators, also policymakers, platforms, enterprises, and policy, cultural policy. So it's a very dynamic story. And also I'd like to pay tribute to some of the long-term work that I've been doing with Dingkun and trying to approach some research questions from different perspectives. It's been challenging, but it's been very rewarding. So I would just like to say my appreciation to Dingkun. And you too have been an inspiration to me as well. So there's something to learn. Everybody can learn from each other. Anyway, one of the byproducts of the project was this book called the Webtooniverse, which, according to Google, we apparently seem to be the first research team to use the term Webtooniverse, which is to suggest that it is very large. There are many moving parts, which I will introduce today. And it's part of a media industry in its own right. But now with the transmedia adaptation, we're seeing it being connected increasingly with a larger industries, Netflix, streaming, OTT, stage, live performance, print. We're actually now seeing digital comics and digital content go to print. So it's not, used to be where it started as print if it wasn't born digital. So if it was born analog, it would go digital. Now we're seeing something that was born digital go analog for the nostalgia, for people to touch and feel tangible and analog media. It's making a comeback, if you can find it. Anyway, we're starting to see the digital back to analog, which, again, people could not have predicted not too long ago. So the Webtooniverse, part of an industry part of a infrastructure, part of a large sphere. What do you know about Webtoons? And by the way, before you answer that, can I just say that we've been doing a lot of standing in front of the screen. So if anybody's listening online, we apologize for not being in the frame. But anyway, we know that you're here and we appreciate your presence. What do you know about Webtoons? What are some of your favorite Webtoons?
Like the biggest difference between Korean webtoons and maybe Japanese manga is that it's colorful and the layout is linear, so it suits a web page style that you need to keep rolling down. Yeah, so but I like didn't watch that much because of the language. I think because I can only access Korean webtoons by some piracy websites in China. So and they tend to translate those more, how can I say, pornographic works rather than those which is real popular in Korea, I think. So like the translator, they will choose some more spicy things to translate.
Okay. What are you going to say something?
Professor Wang talked about this semester during the class, and it's about the critical showcase about the cartoon, especially its origin in Korean, but in China, I think when publisher, it will transfer like the novel, popular novel into this style.
That's right. That's right. We're seeing a synergy, new convergence between web novel and webtoon in China, not just in North America or Korea. And there are reasons for that. One of the main reasons is that web novel and literature publishing companies have been bought out or acquired or merged with webtoon companies. So we're seeing industry activity bring the two together for leveraging the IP. But that's right. This is sort of an unfair question to some of you because I'm about to tell you exactly all the things you mentioned, that it is in color as opposed to manga, which manga is very popular coming out of Japan, primarily black and white. But you would know from reading about manga this year that more and more manga is going color. Now that's obviously for a global audience, possibly for some younger Japanese readers who are tired of black and white or who are seeing it elsewhere, the color elsewhere. So we're seeing webtoon influence the webtoon format, and it is a format, just like a podcast or a book or a radio program or a TV series. It's a format. It's a media format. And also it is vertically scrolling, which I'm about to introduce to you. What about some of your favorite titles? Anybody want to tell us a favorite title of a webtoon that they read?
Mostly about romantic relationship.
The romance
Yeah.
and the drama, very popular genre. There are over 26 genres of webtoons, including apocalyptic, zombie, sports, slice of life, religious, romance, GL, BL, on and so on. Action, horror, comedy, mystery, etc. So strong ties with literature and translation, history and sensibilities. Let me move on and give you some more information. So Webtoon, absolutely, just to be clear, is born in South Korea, but it has become a global phenomenon through its platformization, through non-Korean platforms, getting involved in the sector and the industry, content creators creating webtoons that are not Korean, Chinese content creators, Canadian, American, South American, Latin American, Thai, French, Spanish, German, et cetera, et cetera. So it may have been born in South Korea in the early 2000s, but it's now become a global phenomenon. Vertical, it's both online and mobile and now print. Webtoon, which is the biggest webtoon company, they got in first and they're the biggest. Naver, used to be called Line Webtoon. Now it's just Webtoon. It has a new line of print comics that first they were introduced digitally. Now they're called, it's called Webtoon Unscrolled. Unscrolled, which is their print. These are expensive books. They're not so cheap, but people want to collect them. Lore Olympus is about $60, not Hong Kong, 60 US. And they have it in different languages, very popular in Europe. Europeans still like to hold books. So you can find Webtoon books in bookstores across Europe, maybe even here. Dingkun and I did start looking a little bit, but we need to do some more field work. Very divergent. We would say it's a divergent narrative structure, divergent aesthetic, divergent industry practice. They come out typically weekly, and some people are so addicted to webtoons that they're willing to pay to get the next episode very quickly. But if you can wait and have patience, I know you're smiling. You pay?
I pay a lot.
Sure, and because it's a kind of freemium industry model, freemium. Whereas if you have patience and you're willing to wait, then it's free from a lot of platforms. BL and GL seems to be a very big moneymaker. So platforms that specialize in BL, girls love and boys love, they're making a lot of money, because also it is a cultural policy benefit, because then you could restrict the age limitation when you have a payment scenario. Otherwise, if it's free, almost anybody can access it. So the payment for BL and GL content seems to work in policy favor for education and restriction of age group usage. They're primarily webtoons, that is, creator owned. Again, I started off today's talk by mentioning power at our fingertips. The people who created Spider-Man and Superman and Green Lantern, they don't own the copyright to those characters. Most of the webtoon creators own their own copyright. That's very powerful, and it's an industry game changer. Quite, again, I use this phrase a lot, but it's hard to have imagined this might happen one day. Most of the episodes are weekly, and some content creators write a whole year in advance. If it's possible to do that, then they release it through the app, one of the platforms. They don't, in other words, so it's already created. Other creators do actually their weekly activity, their weekly job is to write the webtoon, create the webtoon every week, four times a week, 4 days a week, maybe 10 hours a day. Although AI has changed all of that, right? AI illustrators. When I was in South Korea in, I think, January, saw an exhibition, saw a demonstration of somebody using an AI tool to draw comics. Ridiculous. It was ridiculous. Why? because all they did was draw a stick figure on a napkin, a little scrap of paper, scanned it, and within seconds, milliseconds, you could create a whole character, change the clothes, change the eyes, change the body shape, just with a prompt, a text prompt. Make the eyes bigger. To make it wasn't voice activated, so they typed in make eyes larger, make them rounder, make them almond shaped. Instantaneous. So the impact that technology, and we'll talk about this on Friday, the impact of technology in our everyday lives is radical, as you know that, and it's very new. You also know that too. We are about to, I think this month, we're entering year 3. There's only been 2 years of AI gen platforms that have been accessible to the public in a wide scale. Only 2 years. We're only 2 years into it. So you're at the beginning of it. We are at the beginning of it. Of what? That's a big question mark. Anyway, Friday. Rich source of intellectual property for transmedia adaptation and merchandise. Big part of the dream, the content creator's dream, to have a Happy Meal, have their cartoon characters in a Happy Meal, have unscrolled print books. So in other words, a lot of people have the dream of create a webtoon and they will become rich. You know, first you make a webtoon, then you get followers, and then you start making the money. You have to be discovered. So it's a kind of dream, and some people are achieving that dream, but of course it's disproportionate to how many people want to have that dream. But it's still possible. And by the way, there are a lot of, if we were economists and we were Marxist kind of critical thinkers, which some of us are, we would be critiquing the business infrastructure and the exploitation of labor. So a lot of times people only talk about the good side of this industry, but there's still a lot of labor exploitation. There's still a lot of people working, not making money, but creating content for a platform. It's the platform that benefits from our labor. So we need to acknowledge that it's not all happy times and not all positive. There's still a lot of labor exploitation in this industry. There are a what I would consider quite a large number of platforms involved in this sector, 80 Korean and 55 non-Korean platforms. 2 billion page views. By the way, the 2 billion page views is for Naver Webtoon. Today's talk is mostly about Naver Webtoon and Naver Webtoon's global facing platform. By the way, Naver is the Google of Korea, of South Korea. Some of you would know that. It's the big search engine, but very early on in the late 90s and early 2000s, Naver figured out they need a lot of different types of content on their search engine to drive traffic, advertising, but also content. Webtoons was one of the content that the search engine offered on its platform. A lot of activity is what this slide concludes. You know, basically tries to say. This is the Webtoon, Naver Webtoon English language landing page. It's a couple of months old. And you could see, I have a pointer. You could see that on Naver's landing page, it's got these over here, English, traditional Chinese, Thai, Indonesian, Spanish, French, and Dutch. These are sister sites of the platform. And when you have a platform that can appeal in these major languages, that's how you go global. I mean, it's very obvious, but it's also strategic. Why aren't there 27 languages there? What happened to simplified Chinese? Why isn't Japanese there? There are different industry decisions and market restrictions, but also strategies for why these are the major, what we call official sites or languages, sister sites for this platform. Also, I'd like to call your attention, you've got originals, which are the A-list, highest popular, higher paid series and content creators. They are chosen by the platform to be an original because they have a high number of likes, high number of registered users. And then you've got Canvas over here, which is the amateur experimental part of the platform where people can upload their work for free. And what do they get in return? They get to hopefully be discovered by users first. And then if they have enough users, then they could hopefully, luckily, maybe get nominated as an original. There are approximately 200,000 Canvas content creators on Canvas, 200,000 series, but less than 500 in originals. So it's really elite. It's kind of interesting that a website, a platform would offer both. Not all Webtoon platforms offer both. Today, we're doing a deep dive into Naver Webtoon. So it doesn't represent all of the different platforms, but it's the biggest and most successful one. And nearly all of the content is for free. What do you mean you're going to give away free comics? Are you crazy? Can you imagine the people in the boardroom sitting around and someone came up with that idea? You're fired. What do you mean we're going to give away content for free? Part of the creative economy, that massive paradigm shift, giving away content for free. I have a very close friend who works for a cinema chain in South Korea, and about more than 10 years ago, they were struggling to get people into the cinema because of the rise of digital content. He said, you should give your films away for free. He said, what do you mean give it away for free? If I suggest that, he would have definitely been fired. But the thinking is different. You make a lot of money from the popcorn, the soda sales. Maybe you can sell merch. It's a whole different paradigm. And I don't know about the literature field, but in the content major entertainment industry, you've got a fight between the people that came from the old traditional bricks and mortar part of the sector, part of the industry, the cinemas, and the new kids on the block who are pushing digital content, digital platforms. They don't agree. They're fighting inside their own company. And so that's why you see some strange choices sometimes, like some of the big TV stations not going streaming until only recently. Why? Because the people doing broadcast, they were refusing to go streaming. And then streaming part came up. So there's internal conflict, which is a big part of the media industries, which we investigate. Anyway, there's a much bigger story here, obviously, and we'll have time for questions. This is the traditional Chinese sister site of Webtoon, and I put it up there because you can see the product tie-ins. I don't know if you guys like those, but I do. They're very yummy. They're shaped like a cone, and they're like a popped corn. Very salty, but they're very yummy. What would you call that? Are they popular in Hong Kong?
Don't know.
牛角，
佛松。
脆角。
Okay.
Point is that it's a product endorsement, product tie-in, transmedia leveraging the IP. You've got popular content. And in a minute, we'll talk about, it's the translators that made it popular, by the way. And you've got product endorsement. So it's not only digital comics and digital webtoons going print. It's not only digital comics going feature film, but you've got now product endorsement. You've got all kinds of different transmedia applications. So this is the same day and the same, but only in the sister trends, the traditional Chinese. A tie-in with a Taiwanese telecom. I was looking for, once upon a time, there was the simplified Chinese sister version, but because of market negotiations and market relationships, Webtoon had to hand over its mainland China market content to a local company. So, but there used to be simplified Chinese landing sister official site, but not anymore. Also, the same thing happened in Japan. There used to be a Japanese version, which was official, but then it got sold off. And it's so restricted that even with a VPN, even with you're telling your laptop that you're in Japan, it somehow knows that you can't get access to the Webtoon site outside of Japan. It's really strictly controlled. So sometimes, yeah, you want to get into a territory you can. Anyway, product tie-in, endorsements. Now we get into aesthetics. And I think it's really interesting because here's something that if you would have predicted would be famous one day, you might have been, you would have been wrong. It's a simple slice of life story, a Malaysian woman who lives with her big nerdy boyfriend. Very popular. Look, almost 1,000 episodes. That's huge. That's huge. In English, by the way. Almost, 800 million views. Spider-Man doesn't even have that many views in its online comic. Nowhere near. And comic book sales of print, Spider-Man doesn't have anywhere close to sales, the comic book sales like that. So something interesting is happening here. It's original. So it started out as an amateur and got somehow found an audience. So the dream is possible to become, and here we're talking about becoming successful, becoming found, discovered. It definitely happens. But really interesting aesthetic. We wouldn't call it an Asian aesthetic. So again, a point about fluidity in the aesthetic realm. Here's another interesting case. This is a short-lived, it wasn't originals. It was hand-picked to become an original. It didn't really earn, let's just say it was hand-picked. It was a bit of an experiment. There were a bunch of people who were high up in the American comic book industry. You could see, look at this pedigree. Ryan Benjamin, who I met in San Diego Comic-Con a few years ago. Huge, like in terms of his CV, resume. A-list comic book creator, illustrator. This was an experiment. Look at the graphics. You could see high level, high detailed, very different from My Nerdy Boyfriend. This was an experiment to see if they could become successful with a traditional American comic book duo could make it in Webtoon world. and they did not make it. They had lettering done in Singapore. They had backgrounds done in Thailand. So they had a lot of famous people attached to it. Why do you think it failed? Anybody have an idea? Why do you think such a relatively good-looking graphics failed?
Maybe it's too time consuming to draw one.
Yes. At that time, in 5 years ago, 6 years ago, too time consuming. This is before AI, right? Plus, it didn't feel right. It never took off. Also, look at the comparison between the aesthetics, that little fluffy dog, for example, and then look at the beautiful. Webtoons wasn't the place for such high-level American style graphics. And they even chose, you can't really see it here, but this is a Buddhist, there's a pagoda. They even chose like an Asian flavored aesthetic and story based. Quite a fascinating story. It had sort of fake animation, and it even had some sound effects. So it was too advanced for Webtoons, ironically. But that's Webtoons. It's very low key. It could have taken off, but it just never did. I think it's a fascinating case study. This is another case study. This is another case study regarding Gerard Butler. He's the action filmmaker. You would have seen White House Down, Greenland, sort of that B-plus type Hollywood blockbuster film. Anyway, Gerard Butler, you can look him up later, has a film production, a Hollywood film production company, G-Base. They created a Webtoon series, again, pretty advanced graphics for Common, the rapper and the artist. Anybody see the TV series Silo? The American series Silo? Anyway, Common is a rapper and an actor. And this Webtoon was created as a platform for a brand new sci-fi intellectual property, IP, a story. So the idea was to use Webtoon to grow IP from the beginning. Never took off. Never took off. Look, this is as of today. Not even 1 million views compared to how many million of views of My Nerdy Boyfriend? That's right. Hard to make a big conclusive judgment about the two different sets of numbers, but the point is that something interesting is happening here. Webtoon users at the moment, at least on this platform, don't want that Hollywood, that American, that big A-list feeling. Okay. This one only did 30 episodes, so it was short-lived. And the idea was start with a Webtoon, and hopefully it'll be a feature film. If we get 800 million views, it'll be an incredible transmedia adaptation, theoretically. Never happened. So it's the failures, the anomalies are really interesting to study. Look, in order to, I need to be conscious of time, but here is another one, which again, is something that you don't see so much in literature necessarily, but you've got the branded Webtoon, which is a commercial. You just don't know it is a commercial. So I wonder in literature if there were examples of stories, short stories perhaps, that were an advertisement, not a traditional story. We probably could find a few. But it's sort of the webtoon used as a tie-in. This is a tie-in. There are different kinds. This one is a tie-in for a Hollywood movie called Pacific Rim. And then here, you've got credits. Webtoons don't normally have credits. They do if they have teams of creators. And by the way, a lot of them do have teams. But this one was, look, lettering, Taylor Esposito, third from the top. That means that person is quite well known. Like, oh my God, you got Taylor to do your lettering? So again, like a comic book, a traditional comic book environment, but was released 2 weeks before Pacific Rim Part 2, what I call Pacific Rim Part 2. Didn't really take off. It did okay. 1.7 million views for a digital advertisement, but serialized, 10 episodes. Again, as an original, there are certain originals that have earned a place. And then there are other series such as this that were artificially promoted, elevated to become an original. And look, it's not I'll just tell you right now, Tom Akel, who was not very high on this list. Tom Akel was a high-ranking executive for the LA office of Webtoon for a couple of years. And so he was trying to make it more American. I suppose that's why he's not there anymore. No, and it's not a joke, but we don't have to wonder too much. It just didn't, it's not meant to be, right now at least, a kind of Marvel or DC American traditional comic book platform. It just isn't. So media industries, right? We're critiquing the industry. Okay. Charismatic appeal, branded webtoon, blah, 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 blah. Hotbed of innovation. There's been a lot of, in the book, we researched some of the experimental kinds of webtoons and technology. You've got the cut toon, the effect toon, the horror toon, flash toon, smart toon, all trying to experiment with different user experiences. And at the end of the day, people just want it simple. They want to put on auto scroll. They want to be able to read the lettering when it's kind of gone a little bit fast. They want to look at some pretty pictures. The pictures are vital. You hear a lot of people, even maybe you feel the same way. Sweet Home? The horror Netflix series, not Sweet Home. I know so many titles that I forget them all. You hear a lot of complaints that the webtoon pictures were much better. The story in the digital comic was much better than the Netflix series. So just using a live action doesn't automatically make it better, which I think is a really interesting research topic anyway. The point is that this is all part of disrupting the industry, innovation, constant innovation, constant. And you may ask why there's not very much audio in webtoons, digital comics. I mean, I hope I'm not embarrassing Dingkun, but Professor Wang used to love heavy metal. You know, why not put heavy metal music soundtrack on a webtoon about a drummer playing in a band? Why isn't there music in digital comics, do you think? Professor, why isn't there music?
Idea.
It's a serious question. I mean, our phones have speakers, our laptops have speakers. So why isn't there audio with most webtoons. Why do you think?
The users are using webtoons on transportation.
Yeah, can you imagine getting in trouble on the MTR? For having your speakers on, but we have Bluetooth. We still have Bluetooth speakers, headphones.
Sometimes a reading class.
Yeah, because we're doing other things. Sometimes we're watching a movie and reading a webtoons. Sometimes we're talking to our mothers and reading webtoons. Sometimes we're in a lecture and reading webtoons. Even though if it's silent. Anyway, in the future, I think people are going to look back and say, why wasn't there audio on your comics? Now, it is hard people read at different speeds. And so when you have that situation, when you stop and start, audio is not easy to synchronize. However, with AI, I think that'll be fixed sooner or later. An AI agent should be able to, if we're scrolling fast, then the AI should be able to speed up the music. Very simple. Anyway, just because we can do something doesn't mean we always do it in the world of entertainment or literature or et cetera, et cetera. So it's a real interesting question, but synchronization is a big issue. Synchronization. Okay. Skipping over Canvas, let's get right to the translation part, which is where I find some really fascinating research topics and research activity. Webtoon, this platform, is got the most advanced translating interface for translators. What they've done is they've enabled not every series, but a large percentage of series to be translated by volunteers. Volunteers, and this is where the labor exploitation is very prominent. And it's one of the few platforms that has done this. Now, why would it do that? It was probably safe to say an experiment in the beginning, but it immediately globalized the Webtoon content. I mean, not immediately, because it takes time to translate different episodes, and it's a kind of coordinated effort, as I'll explain. But it's a distinctive feature. And there are people that became very famous and very popular. They put this on their CV. Oh yeah, I translated Lookism or Lore Olympus in Thai, Malay, and simplified Chinese. So they put that on their CV. They put it out on Twitter, now called X. They built a bit of a reputation. So they got experience. Then the platform, which I'll show you in a minute, you can rank the translations. You can reward or vote thumbs up for a translation. So internally, translators became quite a little bit of like a star on their own, a following. Anyway, it's very unique, they've structured. The platform has structured the interaction with translating in such a way where there's less risk of producing bad translations. So they've put a lot of restrictions on what can be used. Now with AI checking everything, it's ridiculously simple. But back in when it started, 2014, it's quite challenging and quite revolutionary. Auto-translate feature sort of takes a little bit of the creativity and skill out of translating. However, they still get credit for inviting volunteers to translate, did I say 32 different languages? 32. So the platform went global. starting out with English translation as the base, as the Genesis language, Genesis file, from which Thai, French, German, Albanian, Romanian, Bulgarian, different kinds of Portuguese, right, from Portugal, and who else speaks Portuguese? Brazil, thank you, and Malay, Tibetan, Vietnamese, Hindu, et cetera, German, Polish, 32 different languages. So quite a powerful environment in terms of global reach. Most of the translators, about 2/3, are Asian. And as of my count today, simplified Chinese 2279 and traditional 1738. Huge Asia. So Asian fans, Asian translators have played a major role, 2/3 of this popular culture going global. Mostly, if not all, non-paid work. That's some dedication. That's some true dedication. They have teams and they also have individuals. Most of them are individuals. And these are some of the rock stars. They're ranked by participation. So these contributors, these are individual contributors, simplified Chinese. They have their following, their own following, their own celebrity status. This is a traditional Chinese. And here's one rock star. I call them a rock star. Ching Ching joined at the end of 2014, only a few months after the website went quote unquote global. So they've done 11 different series. They must have a day job. Witch Hunt, The Sound of Magic, Winter Woods, Untouchable, My Kitty and Old Dog, Tales of the Unusual, Kids Are All Right, Jingle Jungle. Now you can't read it because the screen is too low, but each one of these squares shows a percentage of how much each one of those squares is an episode. And the system is set up to share the workload. One episode can be collaboratively translated. So you go in, you log in, and you see what needs to be done. You see how much of an episode requires completion, and then you can complete it. You can do a whole episode yourself. You can do a partial episode. So it's all free labor. So it's quite invaluable to the platform, we would say. But just real fascinating in terms of individuals who have volunteered their time in this cultural industry. And it's very similar to IMDb, the movie database in which people spend hours and hours entering data, entering film titles. Also Wikipedia. These are crowdsourced, collaborative platforms where the culture is amassed through the power of the crowd. So if we start to wind down, I think one said I had about an hour. Oh, by the way, here's some different, in terms of research data. We collected all of the, again, you can't really see it because of the low res, but these are all different genres and their popularity in the 4 different markets. This is Malay on the bottom, and then this is Vietnamese. It just got covered up. So different markets have different. Our assumption or our finding was that the attention that different Asian language translators gave different genres was a reflection of the popularity of those genres in those markets. It's not a perfect watertight theory or assumption, but it was one way of understanding the flow, the global flow of this Korean and English language content. So there's a lot of data to crunch and analyze and collect, et cetera. Why are webtoons important? Here's a few reasons. You probably have a few reasons of your own, but that power that content creators have, that they can also own their own content, unthinkable not too long ago. Okay? It's also energizing not only Korea, but Asia's creative industries. People are getting celebrity status by participating, by having the ability to participate and be exploited. But being able to contribute to something formally, I mean, it's an informal economy, but your work is out there. You may not be visible, but it's giving people training, it's giving people practice. You've got this introduction into the Western culture, cultural regimes, cultural contexts, very different than Japanese manga, as we've said at the beginning, very different from American, which used to be so strong, you know, not the only IP game in town anymore. And particularly as we look to the diversity of China and Asian cultures, we start to see different IP possibilities. And massive localization, obviously. Sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it's hidden. You know, the localization process or the glocalization process. And of course, I only touched a little bit of the iceberg, but when you have IP, it's easy to say, have IP, have followers, make money, sort of the three steps, but hard to achieve in reality. But you got to have IP to begin with. So Webtoon, the Webtooniverse has become a petri dish that's, you know, you'd see in a lab to grow intellectual property from which something new can sprout, such as a feature film, such as a book, such as a Happy Meal, okay, merch. And so we have to talk about soft power, the complexity soft power, which some of you may or may not know. Joseph Nye is talking about political and international politics and cultural diplomacy, as opposed to hard power, which is military strength. Soft power is somebody, we have charismatic appeal. We want someone's music. We want to listen to K-pop. We want to listen to J-pop. We want to listen to C-pop. I mean, my mother, she loves K-pop. She doesn't understand the words like many people don't. But you know, that's soft power. Something that's appealing. Now, China has a long history of wanting soft power, but not quite figuring out what has global appeal. 2 weeks ago, I showed my students one of the latest sci-fi movies. What's it called? The Warrior. Not Wolf Warrior, the new one. The Hong Kong sci-fi movie where the green kind of monster takes over.
Where's the picture? It's the one.
Which one?
Where's the picture?
Warriors of the Future. You know, you have this kind of, I mean, very interesting kind of, it was the highest grossing film in Hong Kong when it came out. But we're looking at it as to why would it be appealing? How is it appealing to non-Asian audiences? So we're seeing we are coming into a new era where that is important and that can be recognized and researched. It's all part of that charismatic appeal. And by the way, we didn't use subtitles. We watched it. Sorry, we did. We used English subtitles and they weren't bad. Weren't bad. But it was also, it's on Netflix at the moment. That crossover of Asian content with non-Asian audiences. Starting to see it build more and more power and strength. Also, the acquisition and mergers of different parts of the entertainment industry for leveraging their IP, making, I would argue, that's contributing to super IP, right? It's not just IP, but super IP, energized. Why is Meta buying all of News Corp's content? Or why did Meta try to buy Simon and Schuster, the big book publisher, their catalog of content? They need content to train AI. And they're trying to do it legally as opposed to illegally, even though I think they've already done it illegally. Illegal in the sense that, well, it's on Google, so it must be for free. AI tools, platforms need content to digest, continual. That's how it gets better. Better in quotations. So mergers. You will start to see more unusual mergers between different IP sectors. So Wattpad, which is Canadian-based web novel company being bought out by Naver Webtoon. Now they're making feature films and TV series together. Not only webtoons, but they're making web novels. That's transmedia adaptation. That's transmedia innovation. And it's part of creative, what Schumpeter called creative destruction, where it's disrupting the publishing industry, it's disrupting the literature culture, it's disrupting handheld devices, it's disrupting entertainment. And it's funny, in 1993, do not get in the car with strangers. Our parents used to tell us. 2003, don't meet people from the internet alone. It's a dangerous place. IBM used to have a commercial where three old people were sitting on a park bench. One of them said, "I heard your son is on the internet." And the other lady's like, "Oh my God, that's crazy. That's dangerous. You must be so worried." It was a very funny IBM commercial showing how different generations are not quite in tune with where we're at today. And then to 2024, actually, that should be autonomous. Get in a driverless Uber. What's strange. We're just calling disruption. That's a fact of our modern society and modern culture. And then, of course, look, this is the concluding point, really. This kind of Korean wave, soft power. Webtoons are part of the Korean wave, even though they might not be Korean language webtoons. Laura Olympus, which is she's from New Zealand, very successful English language webtoon. She just retired, by the way. I think the last episode was this month. Had a great run. The point is that you have this invisible part of popular culture, of the soft power, that's no longer even from that country. It's the tech that came from the country initially. So IP, transmedia, innovation, part of a bigger picture. Sweet Home, well, I was right. Sweet Home, I kept thinking of that little kid with the reindeer ears. I think that's also called Sweet Home.
Sweet tooth.
Sweet Tooth. Thank you, Dingkun. Sweet Tooth just launched its third season, didn't it? Sweet Home. A lot of people saying, I like the webtoon better. The story in the webtoon was better than the live action. Sweet Home's still pretty cool though, I think. Zombie breakdown of society. A lot of interesting literature, narratives in the webtoon format. We could talk about this and typically I teach a whole semester on webtoon. So you're very kind to just give me a little more than an hour to talk about it today. And I hope that I've interested you in this theoretical idea of the visibility of popular culture and the odorless or the invisible. Iwabuchi talks about cultural odor. And at one point, you needed to see and smell something that was essential of a particular culture. But now it's masked. We're in a different era. So theoretically, intellectually, or even research-wise, it's giving us challenges in our own research work. Soft power, I've already defined it for you. Joseph Nye is the grandfather of that theory, dating back to the 90s, early 90s. And would love to hear your thoughts and your questions. And again, thank you for your time and this opportunity. And if you're still with us online, which I hope you are, then we can take some questions. Elaine is with us online. Questions, comments?
Any questions? We have some experts of K-pop. Maybe we can start from them.
Oh yeah, did you hear Jin just got out of the army? BTS?
I just completed a research about K-pop industry, and I found your presentation is really interesting for me because I didn't read the webtoon, but I love to watching the K-drama, and some K-drama also are also from the webtoon. So I really interested in how the soft power success. You mentioned that there are Transmedia that are from the K-pop industry and also from the webtoon. So I'm thinking is if any K-pop fan will feel more familiar with the webtoon because it is also from the Korean and also contribute to the Korean soft power. Yeah.
That's right. And there are a couple of BTS webtoons that we've looked at. But ironically, no BTS music in the BTS webtoon. And there are reasons for that. They're hard to get permission. And if it's free, BTS is not in the business of giving their music away for free. I mean, their managers aren't. So maybe they have to do some special paid. But yeah, Jin just got out of the army, which you must be very, I don't know if you're a BTS fan.
I'm not BTS.
But yeah, when are we going to see some C-pop webtoons? And can you recommend any C-pop bands for my mother? Cantonese pop. Okay.
Yeah, because I found some fans will also draw some cartoon or some it doesn't like webtoon material on the Instagram to post about their idols.
So I'm not sure what your question was, but I could bring it back to cultural policy. Cultural policy, we know that it's important to promote national culture, but how to do that and is it profitable? Probably not, and we might not ever know but we know that it's important to send, for the government to provide some funding to send K-pop artists and other artists, fine artists, and other practitioners overseas to different markets, events. That's really, that's part of cultural policy. Also, protecting the local market with quotas and being creative with quotas. So when it comes to music, for example, if a famous American band comes to Hong Kong, must have a Hong Kong local band play, share the stage. Maybe before, but every single international event must have, and this is as an idea, as a policy, cultural policy. So it's using the situation to promote local culture. There's also screen quotas. There's also radio stations that would have C-pop or J-pop or K-pop, mixing it, but requiring minimum amount of local content. That's cultural policy, and that's really important for promoting and protecting the local industry. So what's that's your PhD topic is
MPhil topic.
MPhil, yeah, fantastic.
Professor, so you can get any questions.
I would be curious to know more about your methods, your research methods. You mentioned this ARC project. Is that an ongoing project or it has already been completed?
Well, it was a 3-year project, but then it extends. Like Dingkun and I just published something last week, which took a couple years. So that's what we published in the International Journal of Communication was about this idea of active users using it as a parasocial kind of phenomenon through their communication techniques and their content. So being part of a community, but again, it's sort of like Anderson's imagined community. So going back to your specific question with Webtoons, what we did was we did a lot of scraping and quantifying of the activities. The title of the series, who worked on which episode, when, and what percentage of completion did they contribute, and which languages were done in which order. So we have a time, we can sort of see when a particular series was completely translated or partially translated and by whom. And we're talking about couple 100 million. We're talking about a lot of data.
So will there be textual reading of the particular Webtoon texts? Or
ironically, we have done that last because that seemed to be the easiest thing to do. It's so, unfortunately, in my lifetime, I seem to have avoided the simplest, most accessible parts of culture and text to analyze, because it seemed to be, I don't know, I'm a glutton for punishment. It's kind of weird, but for some reason I've picked more difficult, more inaccessible sources of things to. So no, we haven't analyzed the text, the actual text so much. And then I think it's hard to find the right paradigm or the right framework, because we could do a kind of machine learning analysis of the imagery. At one point, I wanted to do colors. I wanted to kind of do an analysis of the colors because it seemed to be very appropriate. It is a highly colorful format. But then I thought, what can we learn? Okay, purple is really popular in this genre, in this community at this time. but what can that tell us about life? I wasn't convinced there was but the narrative, I mean, certainly like the apocalyptic. One of the things I tried to do was look at the apocalyptic stories during COVID, but there weren't that many apocalyptic to begin with. The ones that are there are fascinating. And so in our study, we were looking for evidence of people commenting about viruses, commenting about fear, commenting about using the Webtoon space and community to talk about virus, their everyday real life fears. And a lot of people used the platform to talk about the virus. Why wouldn't you? My sister got COVID. I lost my auntie. Oh, everybody be safe. So we did an interesting kind of textual analysis of the commentary. But doing an analysis of the genres would be fascinating. I think you're interested in genre based
because
content.
my background is in literary studies.
Yeah.
So I'd be more interested in the stories, narrative, and also the interaction between audience and the creators.
Yeah, I think in the future, we will do more research into the Webtoon audiences, like the one we have just done for the IGLC. We are looking at how the user communities trying to reach out and connect with each other, try to negotiate their negative emotions. For most of the time, they're suffering from anxieties and mental depression. And during the lockdowns, the Webtoon platform accidentally become a kind of like the parasocial space for emotion detection and kind of like the user to find solidarity with each other. But at the same time, the platform was monitoring these user behaviors, trying to clean out the ultra negative hate speech. But there's always be some user transgressions to cross the line and get those harmful contents published. So we are looking at the tech, we can say it's the paratext of Webtooniverse we're analyzing. But personally, I am actually looking at the actual stories because, like the Professor Song, I also like textual analysis into the stories to look at how the intellectual properties are developed and how the world building nowadays are somehow overtaking the importance of characterization and narrative, all those traditional literary concepts, but somehow they become secondary while the creators spend much time and greater attention into world building. Yeah, that's
World building.
Yeah, it's like before you create your characters, before you write story, the authors need to imagine a story world, and they will put history, society, and different characters, different social and human, and maybe some other kind of relationships between the characters, trying to create a kind of logic. What kind of logic can work in that imagined story world? And sometimes that's take the kind of like the top.
Seems to be the story that attracts all these users and sustains them.
Yeah.
Keeps them. So we have to interview the readers and learn about their escapism and how they get lost in the text. I do believe they are it's a wonderful source of escapism. And for some reason it's a different kind of, maybe it's a different part of the brain than reading a book, reading text, 100% text. So that would be really fruitful future research.
Yeah, and also interesting issue that brought up by Webtoon is last weekend I was speaking at CUHK at a workshop. Somehow one of the arguments arising across different sessions is about the cultural authenticity versus Americanization and Disneyization of world literature. Different indigenous stories, but somehow we are looking at a total reversal of this power relationship and the discursal paradigms on Webtoon. The actual dominant Marvel DC genre and the style didn't work out quite well.
That's, yeah.
In the Webtooniverse, but the readers and creators would rather resort to what are indigenous and authentic to the Webtoon group. And whatever the Americans want to bring, they failed. So this might be a counter example that we can continue to work on if we really want to dive deeper into this ongoing discussion about Disneyization and cultural globalization. Okay, any further questions?
Yeah, I'm quite interested in the music that you mentioned that many Webtoon doesn't include the music. I think one of the reasons maybe because it's like the film, like for film they have a story that producers will produce the music appropriately just for the content. So maybe the BTS music not 100% perfectly fit the vibe or the story. Is that could be the reason?
Sure, and I forgot to mention that there are some recommended playlists, like on Spotify or other music platforms that fans would recommend to other fans. Oh, read listen to these 10 songs while you're reading this webtoon. So there's recommended lists by the creator and also by fans. But it is remarkable that it's not a silent experience because of all the other things happening in our lives, but it's open to people bringing their own audio, whether it be natural sound, the television in a different room, the baby's crying, or a teacher talking. So it is interesting.
Good. So is there any question?
Yeah, I think we have one more.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, thank you for a very fascinating talk. I was curious about you mentioned that Webtoon is primarily owned by the creators themselves, and then like to me it sounds really surprising because I thought the platform will definitely had a share of their copyrights and also the later adaptations and kind of monetization of their Webtoons. So I wonder how the platforms they operate in the whole copyright operations. And then I also wonder, do you have any information about the gender distribution among the creators and also the readers, the audience? How many are female creators and male creators? And does they like vary a lot in terms of genres, difference?
Those are excellent questions, and we need to look into the second question in more detail. I don't have the genre or the gender breakdown myself. Also, not every artist identifies their gender, so that's quite hard to scrape or to quantify from a platform. There are some Korean and other sort of government reports that have data on the gender split. The first question, I think, is an interesting one. I don't have specific contracts that I can refer to, but when an artist, a creator is approached, or when they're ready when they're popular enough to be for their IP to be transformed, then they go into negotiations with the platform. The platform is definitely there to take their large slice of the pie. If you become a very, very popular and big name webtoon artist, you can have more power to dictate the terms. We're seeing more and more of those, but it's still only a couple of hundred, if you're lucky. But now Netflix, Paramount, Disney Plus, opening up offices in South Korea, for example, and actively looking for media IP to convert into TV series, streaming, feature films. So we're seeing a shift of recruitment and people on the ground trying to discover the next greatest TV series to release. And so those workers are building relationships with artists, building relationships with platforms, and then still Netflix will be the one to win the power imbalance in that relationship, but the artist will get more than what they've ever or could have gotten. So we're seeing more and more of the platform is still going to win at the end of the day, even though the creators own their own content. So it's sort of a loaded phrase, comes with a caveat. But it's interesting to hear you thinking about the economics of the industry.
You also mentioned there are like several thousand cases of the original, like the editors, they paid deliberately to promote some.
Well, Tom Akel did when he was the managing content creator, director of content in the LA office for 3 years. Tried to change. Yeah, it was fascinating time period. But that's not what Webtoon readers wanted, and it's not what the home platform in Korea wanted. And the readers voted with their eyeballs, as you saw with the numbers.
So we might be able to discuss this more at dinner later. Well, I think now it's a good time to wrap up, but I would like to take this opportunity with Professor Song here. I would like to give it a shout out that we will be launching a Louis Cha lecture series on new frontiers in transcultural fan studies since this September. So we will invite the leading scholars in this area. Actually, we've already started this new, right? So yeah, so stay tuned. Thank you very much for coming today. Have a good night.